This'll be the day she finally embarrasses herself. After this pitch, she's done. I'll make sure of it. That's the message I saw, still lit up on Daniel's tablet screen, sitting on the kitchen counter like a loaded weapon left out in the open. My name wasn't mentioned, but it didn't need to be. The pitch, the timing, the tone, it was about me. And the sender? Daniel. My husband. My business partner. The man who was supposed to have my back, not stab it. The message was sent to someone saved as S. I already knew who that was, Serena, his assistant. She'd been around for almost a year now, always overstepping just enough to raise suspicion, but not enough to say anything outright. Until now, the morning had started like any other. Coffee brewing, laptops charging, both of us prepping for the biggest pitch of our firm's existence, Zenith Corp. We'd spent 6 months positioning ourselves for this deal. Late nights, early mornings, endless rounds of revision. Or at least I had. I was the strategist, the analyst, the architect of every client solution we'd ever delivered. Daniel was the frontman, the charming face of Nova Edge Strategies. That was the story we told people. But this message was a script from a completely different narrative, and the next one hit even harder. Make sure she drinks the coffee. I triple-checked the dosage. She'll just seem off. Confused. Not enough to raise red flags, but enough to blow the deal. I blinked. My hands didn't shake. Not yet. My mind did the math. Dosage, coffee, timing. He wasn't just undermining me. He was planning to chemically sabotage me. In our own kitchen, before a video conference with Zenith Corp's senior leadership team. The meeting that could change everything. I had to make a decision. Fast. From upstairs, I heard his voice on a call. Laughing. Confident. The man who had built this company with me. The man I once believed in. I put the tablet back exactly how I found it. No confrontation. No drama. Just calm, deliberate silence. When he came back into the kitchen, he smiled and handed me a black mug, the one from our honeymoon set, the ones that said yours and mine in gold script. I thanked him sweetly and watched him take a sip from his own. I smiled too. Then I waited until he turned his back to check his laptop. That's when I swapped the mugs. Let him drink what he meant for me. Let him fall on the sword he sharpened behind my back. And when the meeting started, I would be ready. I wasn't just going to survive this betrayal. I was going to use it to burn the old version of my life to the ground and rebuild something stronger from the ashes. Nova Edge Strategies began on a folding table in our apartment's spare bedroom, barely big enough for 2 laptops and a stack of notebooks. We'd just moved to Seattle, full of ambition and blind optimism. Daniel had quit his job in real estate marketing, and I'd walked away from a 6-figure consulting role. Everyone thought we were reckless. Maybe we were. But at the time, it felt like we were building something rare, a shared dream. I handled the strategy. Industry deep dives, pain point analyses, customized pitch decks. I loved the work. The challenge of untangling complex business problems and offering clear, actionable solutions. Daniel, on the other hand, was magnetic. Clients loved his energy, his polish. He knew how to make people feel like they were the most important person in the room. Together, we made a strong team. At least that's what I believed. For the first few years, we were inseparable. We worked 16-hour days, fueled by ambition and instant coffee. We had no safety net, no investors, just our own savings and a handful of contacts we leveraged into our first contracts. Slowly, things started to click. By year 4, we were finally turning a profit. By year 5, we had an actual office space and a part-time assistant. By year 6, Serena joined. She wasn't the first assistant we'd hired, but she was different. Young, hungry, efficient, and very attentive to Daniel. At first, I dismissed it. Daniel was charming with everyone, and Serena was just doing her job. But the late nights became more frequent. The strategy sessions ran longer, and more often than not, I found myself working alone while he handled client relationships. I didn't question it. Not directly. I told myself the business needed him out there, that I could take care of the operations while he kept the revenue coming in. Besides, I didn't want to be the paranoid wife. We were business partners. We were equals, or so I thought. Looking back, I can see how subtle the shift was, how slowly he rewrote our story. In meetings, he began taking credit for strategies I'd developed. During pitches, he referred to my work as supporting materials. Even in internal conversations, he started positioning me as the behind-the-scenes thinker, while he was the face of Nova Edge. I let it happen. That's the part I still wrestle with. Somewhere along the way, I started shrinking myself to preserve the illusion of partnership. I told myself that results mattered more than recognition, that we were working toward the same goals, and ego had no place in our company. But Daniel had other ideas, and so did Serena. So when I read those messages the morning of the Zenith Corp pitch, it didn't just hurt. It clarified everything. This wasn't a single act of betrayal. It was the final move in a long campaign to erase me from the company I built. That's when I decided I wouldn't let them. It wasn't just one message. Once I saw the first, I couldn't stop. I scrolled upward, my thumb steady despite the adrenaline. The entire thread between Daniel and Serena was a digital roadmap of betrayal. They'd been planning this for months. The earliest messages were flirtatious. Inside jokes about late nights and stress relief sessions after client meetings. Then they shifted. Mentions of the exit strategy, references to cleaning house, and a chilling phrase that kept repeating, "Once Zenith Corp signs, we go full transition mode." They were going to force me out of Nova Edge. Daniel had been quietly meeting with a private equity group, pitching them on investing in the firm post-Zenith. But in every conversation, he positioned himself as the sole decision-maker. I was reduced to background noise. His exact words, copied and pasted in a message to Serena. "Elena's great with research, but she's not leadership material. Once the deal closes, I'll offer her a graceful exit. She won't see it coming." Graceful exit? My jaw clenched as I read message after message describing how he'd rewrite the ownership agreement, restructure our equity, and offer me a minor severance. Serena, of course, would be promoted to operations director. One thread struck me cold. "Serena. She's so focused on the pitch. It's almost cute. She has no clue you're about to sideline her." Daniel. "I'll make sure she's just off enough to blow the meeting. After that, everyone will agree she's a liability. She'll be too embarrassed to fight it." Serena. "You got the stuff?" Daniel. "Picked it up yesterday. Measured and harmless, just foggy enough to derail her." I paused. Harmless. They were planning to drug me. Not to harm, but to discredit. A mild sedative, just enough to make me fumble facts, lose my train of thought, maybe slur a few words. In a high-stakes pitch like this one, that would be enough to destroy my credibility. They'd calculated everything, except for me finding out. I took a breath, then another. Motion would be a liability right now. I needed to act, not react. I grabbed my phone and opened the encrypted recording app I'd used during interviews with whistleblower clients. I tapped record and captured every incriminating word on the screen. Then I called my attorney, someone I trusted from prior cases, Jordan Reyes, a quiet, methodical woman with a lethal sense for business law and corporate forensics. "I need to meet today," I said. "There's been an internal threat to my company and I have digital evidence and potential criminal behavior." Jordan didn't ask questions. She just said, "Come by after your meeting, bring everything." Next, I emailed our accountant, requesting access to our financial accounts and a breakdown of owner contributions. It was time to make sure I could separate what was mine from what wasn't. And finally, I created a backup of the messages and saved it in a private cloud folder. Insurance? The plan they'd crafted to erase me was clean, precise, but it had one fatal flaw. I now knew everything. The morning of the Zenith Corp pitch started like so many others had over the last few months. Early, quiet, and focused. Except this time, I wasn't just preparing for a meeting. I was preparing for a takedown. I woke at 6 a.m. on the dot. My body moved on autopilot. 20 minutes of yoga, 10 minutes of meditation, followed by a cold shower. Clarity was my weapon now. Calm would be my armor. By 7:15, I was dressed and in our home office, checking the presentation slides for the final time. Everything was airtight. The deck had been optimized down to the last pixel. The data models were fresh, the case studies recent, and the recommendations tailored to Zenith Corp's operational blind spots. I had prepared this pitch like a surgeon planning a life-saving procedure, methodically with no room for error. Daniel strolled in around 8 o'clock, freshly shaven, wearing the navy suit I had bought him for our anniversary the year before. He looked confident, relaxed, like a man who thought he'd already won. "Big day," he said, flashing that polished smile he reserved for clients and cameras. "The biggest?" I replied, returning the smile with measured warmth. He sat down at his desk across from me, powered up his laptop, and glanced over the outline I'd printed. "Looks great, babe. You've really knocked it out of the park." "I always do," I said softly. There was a pause, just long enough for him to look up. I held his gaze, steady and unreadable. Then he smiled again and turned back to his screen. Around 9 o'clock, he stood up. "Let me make us some coffee," he offered, already heading toward the kitchen. "You'll need the energy." I followed a minute later, just in time to see him at the counter, humming as he stirred something into my mug. When he saw me, he played it off perfectly, even gave me a wink. "Just how you like it," he said, setting the black ceramic cup in front of me. "The one labeled yours." I smiled. "Thanks." When he turned to get his own, I made the switch. Fast, practiced, precise. His cup went to my station. Mine went to his. Back in the office, he placed the mine mug by his laptop, took a generous sip, and exhaled contentedly. I didn't touch mine. We reviewed the deck one final time together, side by side. He played his role flawlessly. So did I. To him, everything was going according to plan. But by 10:30, when the screen filled with the faces of Zenith Corp's executive board, only one of us was in control. Only one of us knew what was really coming. And it wasn't Daniel. At exactly 10:30 a.m., the video call connected. My monitor came to life with the faces of Zenith Corp's leadership team. 6 executives, 3 investors, and 1 general counsel, each framed by the sterile lighting of a corporate boardroom. Daniel straightened in his seat, taking one last sip from the coffee he thought was mine. I watched his hand tremble, barely noticeable, but I saw it. "Good morning, everyone," said Evelyn Markham, Zenith Corp's chief strategy officer. She had a reputation for being no-nonsense, analytical, and nearly impossible to impress. "Let's get started." Daniel took the lead, just as we'd rehearsed. "Thank you, Evelyn, and thank you to the entire team for this opportunity. Elena and I have been working closely to create a tailored solution that addresses your operational bottlenecks and positions Zenith Corp for accelerated growth." I watched him closely. His tone was confident, but slightly too rehearsed. He clicked to the first slide. "Our analysis indicates that your organization is currently experiencing inefficiencies in 3 core areas: cross-functional coordination, supply chain data visibility, and executive decision latency." He paused, blinked, rubbed his forehead. My heart rate remained steady. Daniel took a breath and pushed forward. We believe these issues can be addressed through a multi-phase implementation strategy." His voice slowed, slightly slurred. That was the moment Evelyn's brows lifted. Not enough to signal alarm, but just enough to say, she noticed. I leaned in slightly. "If I may," I said, my tone polished and warm, "I'd like to briefly frame the strategic intent before we dive into the technical layers." Daniel gave a stiff nod, grateful for the assist. "Zenith Corp has an exceptional legacy of innovation," I began. "But with legacy comes scale, and with scale comes complexity. Our approach doesn't just address the pain points. It builds an adaptive framework that evolves as your business grows." The investors nodded. I clicked to the second slide. "As for implementation, we've developed a tiered model. Each phase includes KPIs, cross-departmental accountability checkpoints, and financial impact projections." Daniel tried to chime in, pointing to a chart on the screen, but his words tangled. "And, the technical integrations will be with systems that..." Sorry. He swallowed hard. His hands were now gripping the arms of his chair. His pupils were dilated. Evelyn's expression tightened. "Mr. Brooks, are you feeling all right?" He waved her off. "Just didn't sleep much. I'm fine." But he wasn't, and everyone in that virtual room knew it. I stepped in fully. "If it's okay, I'll walk us through the next 2 segments," I said, already transitioning to the next slide. "Daniel and I built this strategy together, and I'm confident I can speak to every detail." From that point on, I never looked back. The more Daniel drifted, the more I delivered. I answered every question with precision. I highlighted the financial ROI with calm authority, and I did it all while his sabotage slowly unraveled him, sip by sip. By the time we hit the 25-minute mark, Daniel was barely functioning. He was still upright, still trying to look engaged, but the damage was done. His complexion had gone pale, his words were sluggish, and he kept squinting at the screen like the slides were in another language. It was the exact image of a man in over his head, and exactly the opposite of what Zenith Corp expected from a co-founder presenting a multi-million-dollar consulting engagement. "Let me step in here," I said gently as Daniel fumbled over a projected savings figure and repeated the same line twice. Evelyn nodded almost gratefully. "Please." I clicked to the next slide and continued. "As you'll see here, our predictive modeling estimates a 17 to 20% increase in operational efficiency within the first 6 months. These projections are grounded in client data from similar industries and are supported by benchmark comparisons we've validated." I kept my tone professional, crisp, and warm. I was walking a tightrope, commanding enough to take control, but composed enough not to make Daniel's decline look like a deliberate humiliation. It wasn't just about salvaging the presentation. It was about showing them the difference between leadership and liability. Daniel tried to interject once more, muttering something about integration protocols, but his voice cracked and trailed off into silence. He reached for the coffee mug again, but his hand trembled so badly he had to steady it with his other. "Daniel, why don't you take a quick break?" I suggested, keeping my voice light. "You've been up since 4. I've got the next few slides." He blinked at me, confused, then nodded and mumbled, "Yeah, maybe just a minute." He disappeared from the frame. I didn't stop. I clicked forward and transitioned smoothly into the next segment. The implementation plan is structured in 3 distinct phases: diagnostic, optimization, and performance scaling. Each phase includes milestone evaluations and weekly reporting dashboards, and I personally oversee all executive stakeholder alignment during rollout. That got their attention. "You personally?" asked one of the investors, leaning in. "Yes, we don't delegate strategy execution to junior staff. When you partner with Nova Edge, you partner with me." That line landed. I saw the subtle shift in their expressions, from polite interest to genuine engagement. This wasn't just a salvage job. This was a takeover, and they knew it. Daniel returned about 10 minutes later. He looked worse. His eyes were glassy, and there was a slight sheen of sweat on his forehead. He tried to jump back in but couldn't remember where we were. When he attempted to advance the slides, he accidentally exited the presentation entirely. I stepped in instantly, reloading the deck. "It's all right," I said calmly, looking at the camera. "We're almost finished." And we were. The final questions came in, each of which I handled with the kind of clarity only earned through months of real work. When we ended the call, Evelyn smiled. "Thank you, Elena, that was exceptional." Daniel just stared at the screen, dazed. The moment the call ended, Daniel slumped in his chair, staring at the blank screen like it had betrayed him too. "What happened?" he muttered, rubbing his temples. "I felt fine this morning, then everything just blurred." "You've been burning the candle at both ends," I said gently, my voice layered with false concern. "Maybe your body's just catching up with you." He nodded slowly, confused, vulnerable. I watched him stumble toward the bedroom, mumbling something about needing to lie down. I waited until the door clicked shut behind him, then I got to work. Within an hour, I was sitting in my attorney Jordan Reyes's office, laying out everything: screenshots of the messages, the audio recording of our presentation, and notes from my accountant confirming the capital contributions I had made to Nova Edge personally. Jordan's face remained expressionless, but I could tell she was impressed with the preparation. "He tried to chemically sabotage you," she said, flipping through the evidence. "We're not just looking at divorce. We're talking criminal exposure, asset protection, and reputational risk mitigation. Do you want this to go public?" "Only if he pushes back," I said. We began drafting the emergency filings: a formal separation notice, temporary financial protections, and a court order restricting him from accessing the company's accounts or files without my sign-off. Jordan also helped me file an emergency amendment to our partnership agreement based on Daniel's misconduct. It wouldn't take him long to realize he'd walked into a trap. That afternoon, I had another call, this time with Evelyn Markham. She reached out personally. "Elena," she said, "today's presentation was one of the most impressive I've seen in years. You stayed composed under pressure and delivered exactly the clarity we needed." "Thank you," I said sincerely. "That means a lot." "I noticed Daniel seemed unwell," she added delicately. "Yes," I replied. "It's something I've only recently become aware of. I'm taking the appropriate steps to ensure it won't impact our work moving forward." "I'm glad to hear that. Frankly, we'd like to continue the conversation with you directly." It was done. By the next morning, Jordan had served Daniel the divorce papers along with documentation outlining his attempted sabotage. The look on his face when he opened the envelope, half shock, half defeat, was burned into my memory. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. A week later, Serena's professional license was under review. I had forwarded her text exchanges to the ethics board of her industry. Whether she realized it or not, her career in high-level operations was effectively over. Within a month, I assumed full control of Nova Edge. I removed Daniel from the executive board and announced a quiet reorganization of leadership to our clients. Internally, I promoted 2 junior analysts who had stood by me during the chaos and brought on a new operations director, sharp, ethical, and fiercely loyal. The foundation Daniel thought he'd stolen was mine all along. Now I had it back, stronger than ever. 6 months later, I stood at the window of my new office, 26 floors above downtown Seattle, watching the city move below me. The space was open and bright, The kind of place we used to dream about when Nova Edge was just an idea scribbled on a napkin. Except now the company was fully mine, and we were thriving. The Zenith Corp project had exceeded every forecast I had promised. We delivered a 22% boost in operational efficiency and helped them cut $4.3 million in overhead costs by the end of Phase 1. The success of that rollout sparked 2 new contracts, both unsolicited, from their international subsidiaries. Reputation travels fast in this industry. So does evidence. Daniel never challenged the divorce terms. Once Jordan presented the recordings and message threads, his attorney advised him to settle quietly. He walked away with a fraction of what he expected and a gag clause he couldn't violate without risking a defamation suit. His equity stake was dissolved. His voice removed from every policy, every decision, every meeting. Nova Edge moved forward without him. As for Serena, her exit from the industry was less discreet. Word got around. Her messages weren't just unprofessional. They were vindictive, calculated. When I forwarded the thread to the ethics board, I also copied 2 of her former employers. I didn't need to make a public statement. The truth had its own way of getting around. In her absence, I hired people who led with integrity. Analysts who cared more about impact than credit. Strategists who didn't need a spotlight to do exceptional work. Together, we rebuilt Nova Edge's reputation. Not as a fast-talking startup, but as a precision-focused consultancy with leadership that meant what it said. Personally, I began to heal. Slowly, quietly. Moved out of the house Daniel and I once shared. I bought a small loft near the water, minimal, peaceful, and entirely mine. For the first time in years, I had space to think, space to breathe, space to remember who I had been before compromise became a daily habit. Every morning, I made my own coffee. No secrets, no second guesses. Just the quiet ritual of boiling water, grinding beans, and sipping something honest. It tasted stronger than it used to. Maybe because I was too. People sometimes ask if I regret how it all unfolded, if I wish I'd caught the betrayal sooner or handled things differently. But the truth is, what Daniel tried to destroy, he actually revealed. The cracks weren't my weakness. They were the map, and they led me back to myself. He tried to erase me from the story I wrote, but in doing so, he turned a partner into a protagonist. He turned a strategist into a survivor. He turned a survivor into a storm. Now Nova Edge is everything I dreamed it could be. Leaner, smarter, stronger, built not just on data and performance metrics, but on clarity, conviction, and truth. And me? I don't just lead it. I own every inch of it because I earned it. Daniel thought he could silence me with confusion, but he misunderstood who I was. I am not the kind of woman who forgets which cup is which. I am the kind who remembers every detail, who waits until the right moment, and then, without raising her voice, changes the ending. So here's to endings, to betrayals that become beginnings, to sabotage that becomes strategy, to coffee, clarity, and clean slates, and most of all, to never forgetting who you are, especially when someone tries to make you disappear.